Thank you for joining us. Many people are concerned and saying all across the United States that moral values and ethical standards are declining in an increasingly permissive, politically correct society. Too many people overlook most of what we take for granted, including public safety. It is law enforcement men and women who serve and protect while educating the public with dedication and integrity. Our show today is a tribute to these heroes, and we'll learn more from Rick Maglione, the Chief of Police of Fort Lauderdale, following these messages.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and has grown to become the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 compared with how people die today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. Log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful, a miracle. Oh, it was beautiful, magical. And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable. Oh, intellectual, cynical.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
With us now is Chief Maglione, Chief of Police of the City of Fort Lauderdale. A pleasure and honor, sir.
My pleasure.
We're witnessing such interesting times in history with great technology, but unfortunately also greater challenges with regard to law enforcement. I'm personally concerned with the challenges that you face, as all chiefs of police do in this great nation.
Well, first I'd like to offer my admiration and my great respect for the military that does everything they can to keep this country and other countries, our allies, safe overseas. But yes, my position here is unique to the country and the city of Fort Lauderdale, but we face unique challenges here, especially in current times with what's going on around the nation with some of the anti-police sentiment that's going around right now. When I inherited this position, which I'm grateful to have been appointed to in January of 2017, we were looking at some unique factors that were going on in law enforcement that in my 25 years I've never experienced here. There was anti-police sentiment around the country with some controversial cases that occurred, and I think sometimes in those cases the police acted properly, and in other times I believe that the police actions were questionable. However, you can never unring a bell, and sometimes the first story to go out is the loudest story. And witnesses on scene and people that they've interviewed at various situations where the police actions came under question. There's folks there that are on the scene that can say whatever they feel like seeing, and the police have a responsibility not only to the officer involved and to the community, but to the suspect as well, to do a objective and thorough investigation into what occurred. So a lot of times we have to keep our comments to ourselves so we don't jeopardize the investigation. So when the facts come out, whatever they are, weeks, months, sometimes even years later, the bell has already been rung and it's hard to unring that bell. And that's resulted oftentimes in unjustified responses toward the police, and some of them violent. So when I was appointed to this position, it was just after the officers were ambushed in a sniper-style attack in Dallas, and just after the officers were ambushed as well in Baton Rouge. In fact, I was acting chief when those incidents occurred. And I didn't just have to balance the needs of the community, I had to also balance the needs and the concerns, and to be honest with you, the fears of our police officers going out into the streets with attacks against police that we've never seen. You know, we always have to worry about the folks we're dealing with on a particular scene. It was never really a concern, although it was always a possibility, but it was never really a concern to officers on the scene that we may be attacked by the unseen, by folks from a rooftop or a parking garage or someone who's completely uninvolved in the incident. And even after that, there were officers that were involved in traffic stops around the country that didn't have a confrontation with the folks that they were engaged in the traffic stop with, but someone driving by just started shooting at them, or while they were just sitting in a car. Most recently, the officer in New York City who was just sitting in a command vehicle, and someone just walked up and executed her. Those were always possibilities, but they weren't realities. And I had to address that too. So I had concerns, fears, and the safety needs of our police officers to address so they could still go out and do their jobs effectively and efficiently. And to respond to those needs, we equipped them with better equipment, with additional officers. We bought them ballistic carriers that had plates that would withstand rifle fire. And we did several other things that are tactical things that I really wouldn't discuss, but to enhance their safety. But we also have to be concerned with the public perception of the over-militarization of police, so you have to consider that too. So we also had to make sure that we stepped up our community engagement. We continued our outreach. We ensured the officers that despite what's going on, the vast majority of the public still supports law enforcement, still understands the need, still looks out for law enforcement. This really is a pro-law enforcement country. Unfortunately, sometimes when negative things happen, that steps to the forefront. So we had to ensure our officers that the support is still there for them.
I feel it's absolutely outrageous. It's inconceivable that people can perpetrate such crimes. Without law enforcement, the fabric of our whole society collapses. To justify it and make excuses for the hooliganism, people who will riot after some police action occurs, whether justified entirely or not, is hooliganism. It is a pretext to break the law under the pretense of outrage. I believe it is more essential than ever for the public to be educated and to understand and respect law enforcement.
Well, I can tell you this, and what we experienced here in Fort Lauderdale, being that it's the hub of Broward County, and a lot of folks come here to exercise their right to protest. And every protest that we've had here has been peaceful, not really disruptive other than a few minor disruptions to vehicular traffic. Nobody's been injured. There's been very few arrests. So we appreciate that too. Folks have the right to speak their mind. That's part of what this country is based on, and we'll protect that right. And we do that nearly every weekend. There's some type of protest that goes on here. And fortunately, and I believe it's got a lot to do with the relationship between us and even the folks that don't agree with us all the time. It's at least a mutual respect here. So fortunately, we haven't seen what's gone on in other places in the country. And we've had protests here on world events, on events occurring in other places in the country, and not just law enforcement versus public type protests. The North Dakota pipeline, there was protests in Fort Lauderdale. There was Israel and Palestinian protests, nothing that occurred in Fort Lauderdale, but the protests are here. And we welcome that. Like I said, it's part of what this country is based on, is freedom of speech, and we'll protect everybody's rights to do that. But I really have to give it up to the folks that come here to exercise their opinion, as well as our police officers for being able to maintain a mutually peaceful environment when those events are going on.
One of the realities of our world today is the concern regarding terrorism. And if I may say so, it is generally Islamic terrorism. How is Broward County dealing with security in that regard?
Well, I mean, Broward County is a very diverse population. You know, we're made up of every every race, every ethnic background. So we're not really trained either as a department or even on a larger level to, and I don't want to use the word stereotype, but to look at someone's physical appearance to make a decision on whether we need to investigate things further. We base it on acts, we base it on associations, we base it on intelligence. Now, the federal government is very active down here. You know, obviously this is one of the areas where we have FBI, we have FDLE, we have Homeland Security. All the federal agencies are here too, and we work together very well with each other. We share intelligence regularly. So we are kept abreast of what they're working on, and we keep them abreast of what we are working on. And with that shared intelligence, we feel that we have a pretty good grasp on who to look out for and what to look out for, but it's not based on, you know, Islamic or based on, you know, homegrown terrorists. It's based on intelligence and things that we observe that we could articulate. And that's how, but it's a lot of information sharing. A lot of information sharing keeps us safe. And again, I give credit to them because we've been very fortunate down here that before anything too significant has occurred, they've been able to thwart those activities. In fact, if you remember not too long ago, I believe it was in North Miami, there was an individual had plans to attack a synagogue, and they stopped him before it happened. So hopefully they keep having successes like that and continue to maintain our safety down here.
Chief, I'd like to ask you, what is being done to educate the public and improve community relations in general?
Sure. One of the things that, because we inherited an 8% increase in crime from last year, obviously we had to step up our enforcement activities. I also feel that when we step up our enforcement activities, we have to proportionally step up our community engagement. And we've done several things to do that. To increase our community engagement, we're creating a new unit that we actually got funded under a COPS hiring grant that is going to be an 8 officer addition to our police department that is initially funded through a grant, and then we will pick up those folks later, that their sole mission is going to be community engagement and crime prevention, not law enforcement, but crime prevention and building our ties with the community. In addition to that, each district, our city is broken up into 3 districts. Each district has their own neighborhood action team who focuses on community engagement and interaction with the neighborhood. In fact, this Saturday we have a law enforcement versus community member softball game. Just things to show the folks in the community that we're real people too, to show the kids that we're their friends and we're their protectors. We're not just here to put handcuffs on somebody when people make a mistake. And I actually think that keeps us a little safer too, because they see us as people. And we've had folks actually assist or interfere to prevent something from going poorly for an officer. So it's really paying off in dividends. One of the other things that I'm committed to is increasing the public trust and increasing department transparency. Besides the fact that Florida is a public records state and everything is available, we wanted to see what else could we do to increase the public trust. You know, in addition to all of our internal affairs cases going before the Citizens Police Review Board, which is a board of citizens that are appointed by commissioners, so every geographic area of the city is represented, and it also has some police employees on the board where they review all of the internal affairs cases, investigations of officer misconduct, and they make a determination whether they feel that we did a thorough and objective investigation into our own officers when they're alleged to have done something improper. We also have now outsourced certain uses of forces to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We partnered with them, so now when we have an officer use of deadly force or any use of force that happens to result in the death or serious bodily injury of somebody, then the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is going to come down and conduct the investigation into that matter.
How has technology changed crime in general over the years?
Well, I tell you, I think people could be more successful criminals sitting behind a keyboard than they can going into a bank with a mask on their face, which it shouldn't be that way. I think the victim pool has increased. I think with the electronic age of crime, there's a lot more identity theft. You know, there's a lot more folks being taken advantage of that may not realize it right away by either having their information stolen or some of their secured accounts being hacked into. And it's also a difficult crime to fight, for lack of a better word, because there's jurisdictional issues. Someone could be sitting in another country behind a keyboard, taking advantage or victimizing somebody who lives in Florida through their credit card that the bank is in California. So there's often, how do you pursue that criminal? How do you prosecute that criminal? How do you bring that person to justice? It's very difficult, and we have to evolve along with those changes. So it's made law enforcement, particularly the economic crimes, very challenging to fight. In fact, we have a whole unit of economic crimes detectives that are really good at what they do, and it's a very difficult crime to pursue.
What trends are there in criminal activity in general as compared to a couple of decades ago?
I could tell you this now. We have a little bit of a county-wide increase in crime also, and I'm very proud to say that Fort Lauderdale so far this year is down nearly 3% in crime from last year. We're also down 7% in violent crime, which to me is a greater success. What we're experiencing in our city is an increase in vehicle burglaries, and it's kind of funny, but it's come full circle. Auto theft is very popular again. It really waned off for many years, and now auto theft is becoming pretty popular again. And both cars that are being brought to chop shops or revinned or shipped out of the country, and cars that are being stolen to use in other crimes. In fact, one of the biggest crime sprees that I've noticed in the last 6 months, which I think we've gotten a little bit better of a handle on now, is folks, usually juveniles, were breaking into car dealerships or going into car dealerships while they're open and stealing handfuls of car keys to brand new cars, and then coming back at a later time and stealing the cars that those keys go along with. We'd have multiple cars stolen from one dealership in a single night, sometimes double digits from one dealership in one night.
That's quite enterprising, I would say.
It is, and again, the electronic age, it's not so much slim jimming a door anymore and breaking the steering column. Now there's even devices that they can create at home that can steal the codes or whatever, for lack of a better word, and they can unlock the car with their own home-built remote just by intercepting that frequency. So they don't even have to steal the car keys in a lot of occasions. And even when we have home burglaries, a lot of times the car keys are getting stolen and they're coming back later to steal the cars. So auto theft has become a thriving enterprise again. And I think what we have to do is maybe better attack the demand side of the equation. Where are these cars going? What are the folks doing with these cars? Are they buying them? Are they exporting them? Are they revinning them? And we have to make a more concerted effort, but it's more of a regional thing, not a city thing, to go after the places where these cars are winding up. Because if the demand's gone, no one's going to want to steal them because there's nothing to do with them.
Speaking with you here today in Fort Lauderdale reminds me that many years ago, when I was abroad, before I came to the United States, I saw this wonderful movie, comedy, Where the Boys Are, with that lovely song. And it makes me think about spring break. Are things as crazy today as they were back in the day?
I grew up down here, so maybe I was even a first-hand witness to back in the day. I think the 80s is when the spring break activity, for whatever good and whatever bad it was, peaked in the 80s. And no, it's not the same anymore. I think the whole beach in Fort Lauderdale has been rebranded, for lack of a better word. I think the hotels and the restaurants aren't the same as they were. They're not $20 a night and you could stick 15 kids in a room. It's business owners and restaurateurs and all the establishments down there on the beach really care about the beach. I mean, they're stakeholders in the community and do their best to make sure that the beach remains a family-friendly place to visit. Now, with that being said, it's still a popular spring break destination. And every year we know what colleges are getting out at what time, and we expect different peaks and valleys in the activity. We know when the Florida schools are out, which may not bring the crowds to the hotels, but may bring bigger crowds because kids are home and they bring their friends with them. And even if they're staying at their houses, the beach will get busy, but maybe not as busy in the hotels. But we definitely keep abreast of what's going on. One of the other things we do is we reach out to the various colleges in advance, and we let them know that, you know, your students and these kids are welcome to come here and enjoy themselves, but we give them the ground rules prior to them coming here.
Speaking of wellness and community relations, someone who very much appreciates all that you're doing happens to be one of our main sponsors, and that is Life Extension Foundation. Bill Falloon, in fact, has stores right here. It's a national company that produces supplements and magazines such as this, and Bill asked me to give this to you and his book Pharmocracy. So at your leisure, just wanted to introduce you to that. And before we conclude, share a final thought with our audience.
Well, as the Chief of Police of Fort Lauderdale, it is my goal, as I said before, to erase that line that divides us and the public. We're here for you. You know, we're an adaptable, customizable police department, and it's not like you can choose where you spend your money. You can't choose what police department comes to your assistance when you call. And we understand that, and we appreciate that. But we're not going to get complacent because you don't have a choice either, and it's our endeavor to provide the folks in this community with the best law enforcement services that we can.
Sir, I have great respect for you and all of your colleagues in law enforcement. It's most important, very essential, and very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
I'll be right back. With us now, State Attorney Dave Aronberg. It's a real pleasure, privilege, and an honor, sir.
The pleasure is mine. Thanks for coming this way, Richard.
You're reputed to be a relentless advocate of justice. You've been doing things way beyond what most state attorneys do. Your career just speaks for itself, but most recently involved with identity theft. Tell us about it.
Well, identity theft continues to be one of the fastest growing crimes, not just in Florida, but across the country. And the big part of it we're seeing these days is that people are getting their income tax refunds stolen. By the time you apply for a refund from the IRS, someone else has already claimed your refund, and that's becoming a growing problem. In fact, the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, found it happened to him. It's happened to everyone from all walks of life, even my mom. That's when you knew it got real, when it happened to my own mother. But it's something that is, anyone is susceptible to it. So we try to teach people that ways to avoid being a victim of identity theft are such as file early, make sure you shred your personal documents. It's good to have check your credit reports. There's so many different ways you can help avoid becoming a victim.
There are criticisms that the government doesn't react promptly enough, and people who lose their identity or have their check stolen, they're not assisted in a timely manner. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we're still trying to catch up with this relatively new scourge of identity theft. I know it's been around for years now, but compared to other crimes, we're still trying to catch up with the new technologies that's out there. The fact that the IRS scam is so prevalent is fairly new, and yet people find out how difficult it is to get their identity back, that it takes months, sometimes years, because there's creditors who are still calling, there's defaults out there, and it takes a long time to clear your name, and unfortunately there's no push of a button that can make it all go away.
How interesting. Technology just brings in new methods of doing what humanity has always done.
Yes, exactly.
Unfortunate. Changing topics, you've also been very active with regard to drug laundering, chasing those who are doing that, and of course hiding terrorist assets. Could you please share with our audience a little in that regard?
Well, in 2000 and 2001, I was a White House fellow. I worked in 2 presidential administrations at the Treasury Department, and I was involved with our nation's anti-money laundering efforts. And as part of our fight against international money laundering, we looked at the laundering of terrorist assets. And this is something that is, to me, perhaps the most cost-effective way of fighting terrorism is cutting off their flow of funds. And if you can do that, you can stop the lifeblood that fuels terrorism by cutting off their money. And there are money laundering havens throughout the world. We know where they are, and we need to continue to get tough on them, threaten sanctions, and I think that is one of the best ways to combat terrorism.
What seems inconceivable is that the Arab world, with the immense wealth they have, thanks to American oil technology that was brought to the Middle East, why is it that they even need funding from the United States?
You mean the Arab world or
terrorism?
Oh, terrorism. Well, terrorism doesn't need funding from the United States. Terrorism can get their funding through growing poppy, for example, or, drug trafficking, human trafficking. You see that ISIS is involved with trafficking of sex slaves. They are a criminal enterprise, and just like any other criminal enterprise, they're fueled by, they depend on moving their money around. They can't put their money in banks. We'll find it, we'll stop it, we'll freeze it. So instead, they find ways to transfer the illicit gains, and that money goes right into promoting terrorism around the world.
But why would they want to launder money in the United States?
Oh, the anti-money laundering efforts that I was involved in, that the Treasury Department continues to be involved in, it's international. The money laundering havens that I focused on were offshore. Very little were in the United States. In fact, I didn't even look at them in the United States. We're too busy looking at a list of countries on what was called the FATF, which is a FATF. It's a financial task force around the world. They have a hot list of the top money laundering havens. And some of these countries you would never hear of, and I had never heard of them before I saw them on the list. And then I never heard of them again until I watched Survivor on TV, and that's where some of the people were sent, these little exotic islands that are known only for the TV show Survivor or for being a money laundering haven.
I and many of my team have great admiration for you, as Bill mentioned earlier, and I would love to see you continue with the wonderful work you're doing. In fact, I wish all the state attorneys in this country were half as dedicated as you. I want to thank you so very much for being with us today.
Richard, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Every day, people risk their lives to save the lives of others.
They keep our country safe.
Protect our freedom and the lives of our citizens.
Which is why I chose to serve.
But I am not the only one that can serve our country.
You don't have to be in the military to serve your country.
You don't have to risk your life to make a difference.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and has grown to become the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 compared with how people die today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. Log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
This brings us to the end of the show for today. I'm Paul Peritz. Thank you for being with us.
The preceding program was sponsored by RCP Productions Incorporated and Friends of the Shalom Show.